o te whātulo watu le mamalu ma le ia o whātasi maili nei e whiawhi. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. You would think that after teaching for well over 50 years that I would be used to doing things like this. I'm not. I'm glad I've retired. I'm retired and I no longer have a regular job. But I'm very happy to be here this evening. I have to be very happy because I couldn't say no to my daughter that I should come again and read you a couple of poems. To earn my supper, I'm going to read a couple of poems to fill in the 6 minutes I've been allocated. I published my first collection of poetry, this is the only copy probably left in existence, called Inside Us the Dead, in 1976. My first poems to be published in New Zealand started to be published in 1960. So you can figure out, those people who are good at arithmetic can work out how many years I've been publishing work. And in this collection called Inside Us the Dead is a very short poem which I wrote for the person who invited me and Raina to come here this evening. It's my daughter, Sina. I wrote this poem for Sina, which is a very short poem, in the early 1960s, when we were living in a pier in Samoa, in a street opposite the Mototua Hospital, and the street was called Centipede Alley, because it was shaped like a centipede. And in this street was lined with flame trees, otherwise known as flamboyant trees. And I wrote this poem when describing a Sina who was only about 3 or 4 years old. And my daughter was very precocious. The neighborhood got so used to her, she would get up in the morning, get dressed, and walk down the street and knock on their doors and invite herself for breakfast. So I thought I would write a poem. It's called Fosina. My daughter has been playing all morning in the street of flamboyant trees. Now she is asleep, blood hot with sun like hibiscus. Skin smooth palm milk exudes serenity of sleep. She will wake in whispers, the evening cool in the mirror above her bed, cool in petals of orchids in the vase, and breathe the scent of the falling sky. She's turned out okay, right? Okay. The second poem I'm going to read, I'm going to use this reading to promote a book which has just come out. It's called Essential New Zealand Poems. It's 150 poems, and they've included one of my poems, one of my recent poems. I'll read you the poem. My mother died when I was me and my brothers were very young. I was only 15, and I was at boarding school at New Plymouth Boys High School. And I couldn't go home to her. This was back in the 1950s, and I couldn't go to Samoa for her funeral. Her absence has been an enormous influence in my life. I'll have to stop for a minute and calm down and read the poem. Okay. I wrote this poem, it's called Last Night. I wrote it while Raina and I were living in Hawaii. I had the Citizens Chair at the University of Hawaii from the year 2004 to 2008. and Rain and I spent 4 of the happiest years of our life in Hawaii. And I wrote this poem. It's called Last Night. And it mentions the Ko'olau Range. Behind the University of Hawaii is a valley called the Ko'olau Valley. It's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. And we were very fortunate to live there. Okay, here, I'll read the poem and then get out of your hearing. Last night, all night, a blustery wind blew from the Ko'olau. It had no face and eyes, and didn't know it had a tongue. Last night, all night, on the steep slopes of the valley, a dog barked, as slippery as the pebbles of the Mano stream, that will never know it is alive and singing for the sea. The touch of my mother's fingers on my eyes kept me awake. In our house, I needed to be afraid. I needed the healing of the blue darkness that doesn't know it has desires, and my mother who wants my forgiveness for having left 50 or so years ago. No one will be saved, I heard her say to a child who needed to grow a soul that wanted saving. She also promised me the morning's dolphin light, the skip and dance of the incoming tide, the quick intelligence of the rain. She promised me amazement, enough to fill my pockets, enough to give away and create a life with. My pockets are almost empty now. Last night, I wanted her to peel off her face and stretch it across mine. I wanted her to give me her tongue and eyes. I wanted her to promise she wouldn't die again without me. Last night, all night, she waited for me at the edge of the blue darkness. Sorry to depress you while you couldn't have.